The 5 school districts there in Northern Virginia are not the only ones that the Department of Education has its eyes on. In fact, under investigation right now are 4 school districts in Kansas that have also been accused of violating Title IX. Joining me now to discuss this issue is Angela Morabito. She's the Director of Media Outreach and Spokesperson for the Defense of Freedom Institute, which had frankly, they were the ones that drew the attention of the Department of Education to these 4 school districts. Angela, welcome to Washington Watch. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jody. It is great to be with a fellow Georgian.
Hey, well, go Dogs. Of course, we better move on from that. All right, Angela, talk to me. Your organization has informed the department's Student Privacy Policy Office about these 4 different school districts. What brought all of that about? What brought issues to your attention?
Sure. Well, DFI is on the forefront of protecting Title IX from attacks from the left. And those attacks come from, in many cases, woke bureaucrats in the states who have decided that for some reason they believe Title IX is optional and that schools should keep secrets from parents. We know that is not true either morally or legally. So we hear from parents and folks in their communities. We also do our own research. But we filed complaints all across the country. Among our other work in countering the teacher unions and protecting education freedom, we filed this series of complaints against school districts and states that have decided to allow boys and girls sports and spaces. And in this case, in these 4 districts in Kansas, they've decided that it should be school policy to not tell parents when a child rejects his or her own body.
Wow. All right, so the complaints have come. I mean, you were there right in the middle of the complaints. Were these school districts notified previously of their violations? Did they receive previous complaints from parents, or was it just y'all? How does this process develop?
So the Department of Education has an Office for Civil Rights. And as a former Department of Education press secretary, it would be hard for me to overstate just how important that office is. We don't have any way of knowing who else might have filed complaints, but we do know that Secretary McMahon credits the Defense of Freedom Institute in her press release announcing investigations into these 4 districts. So we know that the complaint we filed actually prompted the Department of Ed to take a very strong interest in this and to investigate whether or not the law is being followed and ultimately, we hope, bring these districts into compliance.
Wow. Congratulations on that. That is huge. And listen, that just illustrates the point that as we speak up and expose things like this, that action happens. I mean, things happen when we are a voice and when we bring to light things that need to be brought to light. So thank you for doing that, and congratulations for being heard to this extent. Now, let me ask you this, Angela. Is there anything within any of these school districts in Kansas, is there anything, any loophole, any way whatsoever whereby they might be able to justify their failure to abide by the law as it relates to Title IX?
I don't believe so, because there are no loopholes in Title IX and there aren't really any loopholes in FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Those laws are really clear about what schools' obligations are to their students and to parents of minor children. So even when these districts' policies sound a little bit wishy-washy, like, well, we might involve a parent, or we'll handle gender identity issues on a case-by-case basis, that right there is a problem because it violates Title IX, which says no discrimination on the basis of sex. That means doesn't matter how you woke up feeling this morning, doesn't matter your self-image or what you would like to be, matters who you are and how you were born. We're working with biological reality. And until there are loopholes in that, I think these 4 districts are going to have a very hard time defending policies that just don't add up.
Very well said. So what does it communicate to you? What does it communicate to parents when we see school districts, and I don't know if you heard my previous guest from Virginia, they're dealing with a similar thing, just outward defiance of the law. What are we turning into when we are watching one school district after another in different parts of our country thumb their nose at federal law and thumb their nose at parents and parental rights and just indoctrinate these kids with what they want to teach them. What is this communicating from a broader perspective, do you think?
Well, it tells parents that they don't matter and that schools have more authority over children than the parents do. That's just wrong. It violates basic common sense, common decency, and in these cases, it also violates the law. But when we have investigations like this one from the Office for Civil Rights, it puts every district on notice. It signals to them, you can't hide your misbehavior. We're going to find these unlawful policies and we're going to get them corrected. We're either a nation of laws or we're a nation of feelings. I think the past administration wanted us to be a nation of feelings, but there is thankfully a new sheriff in town who is saying, if you want federal dollars, you need to play by federal rules.
Yeah, and you would think that would be listened to, you would think. So what do you anticipate is going to come from all of this shining of the light on these violations?
I love that you use the phrase shining the light because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I think we'll see that here. When I talk to people about this story in Kansas and similar stories in Northern Virginia, places like New York and California, the answer I get is like, Kansas? Really? And I say, yes, Kansas, really. Just because you live in a red state or even a red district does not mean that woke bureaucrats are not trying to break the law. So parents really cannot afford to ignore what's going on in their children's schools. They can't afford to look away. This is something everyone needs to be aware of, and I look forward to seeing the results of the department's investigation.
So are you seeing parents come on board with this? I mean, is there momentum developing to address this from a parental perspective?
There is absolutely motivation and energy behind this movement. And these parents, a lot of them are unlikely activists. I lived in DC for almost 13 years, so I'm kind of what people might think of as a political person. But what I've seen and heard from around the country is people who have little to no interest in politics. These are just moms and dads saying, I don't want my daughter to be forced to change clothes with a man in the locker room. It's not a partisan issue. This is an issue of right and wrong. And I think that's part of why we see such a strong uprising of parents who, regardless of who they are, where they live, maybe even how they vote, they know that violating Title IX is not right. And it's transformed into this massive issue that school districts cannot ignore any longer.
Well, you mentioned the surprise, and I'm glad you did bring it up as a surprise because it was to me as well. That Kansas, of all places, I would not have anticipated something like this in a place like Kansas. But you referenced North Virginia, New York, California, all these other places. Angela, we have viewers and listeners all across the country. And as you referenced, things like this seem to be happening everywhere. What would you say to parents right now across the country who either are experiencing this or are suspicious that something like this is going on or that it could go on? What would be your message to them?
I've got two pieces of advice, and the first is really simple. It's just be aware. This back to school season, you're probably getting a flurry of emails about district policies and bus schedules and sports schedules and all that good stuff. Don't just click delete. Please know what is in your school district's policies. You cannot afford to be unaware. And the second is, if and when you see something wrong, please reach out to us at the Defense of Freedom Institute. We're at dfipolicy.org. We hear from parents all the time, and it is at the core of our mission to protect your rights and the rights of your children. So please do not be shy about reaching out if there are ways that we can help.
All right, looking into the future real quickly with all this, are we going to see a victory?
I believe so. I think the tides are turning, not just in Washington, but very much in communities around the country where parents are standing up and saying, we're not going to take this anymore. Your previous guest had a great story about teenage boys calling out the gender ideology nonsense and saying, yeah, we're not going to put up with this. So I think the days of wokeness are numbered, and I can't wait to see it become a thing of the past.
We join you in that. Thank you so much, Angela Morabito. I've got my tongue tangled up there. Thank you for joining us so much. God bless you. Thanks for standing firm.